Chapter 16. Narrative continued by the Doctor how the ship was abandoned. Of all the ones to not do in advance. So, this is told from the perspective of Dr. Livesey. Jim's gone quiet for a little bit. We've changed perspective. I'm just seeing how long this chapter is in terms of whether or not I can do this all in Dr. Livesey's voice. I can't. No, I can't. Okay, so... Well, you all remember that Dr. Livesey's voice is like this, and when he speaks, that will be his voice. But for now, we're in his head, so his voice sounds like my voice. Have a quick sip. Okay, yum. It was about 1:30, 3 bells, in the sea phrase, that the 2 boats went ashore from the Hispaniola. The captain, the squire and I were talking matters over in the cabin. Had there been a breath of wind, we should have fallen on the 6 mutineers who were left aboard with us, slipped our cable, and away to sea. But the wind was wanting, and to complete our helplessness, down came Hunter with the news that Jim Hawkins had slipped into a boat and was gone ashore with the rest. It never occurred to us to doubt Jim Hawkins, but we were alarmed for his safety. Oh, that's good to hear. With the men in the temper they were in, it seemed an even chance if we should see the lad again. We ran on deck. The pitch was bubbling in the seams. The nasty stench of the place turned me sick. If ever a man smelt fever and dysentery, it was in that abominable anchorage. So, basically, he's the pitch is bubbling. So, that's like the tar, the pitch that's holding all the wood together and stuff. So it's probably really hot and it's all sticky and bubbling away. Like you get them. Like one of my neighbours growing up had a fence like that. It was like painted like with tar or pitch or something like that. It was horrible. It stank. And you'd be going home from primary school like la 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 and run your hand along it. Like, horrible, stinky. But anyway, this ship is covered in this stuff. And these folks are probably not very healthy either. As we know, they've only got 1 barrel of apples between them to stop them from getting scurvy, because you get scurvy from a lack of vitamin C. They'd be drinking stale water that will have been in a wooden barrel all the way from England into the Caribbean. So disgusting old. And as an alternative to drinking the gross, brown, warm, dirty, splinter-filled water, all they would have had was probably ale, which was in a way cleaner than the water because it was alcoholic. But of course, then all you're drinking is warm ale, warm old ale that's been in a tarry old barrel for weeks. None of this is very conducive to not having constant diarrhoea and illness. There would have been a lot of that on board a ship in the 18th century. What would they have been eating? They'd have been eating dried beef, salted pork. You're talking about my life's 50 pence. Look, what you eat out of barrels is your own business, 50 pence. But I wouldn't advise anyone to have the diet of these sailors, these pirates, to give them the correct name. Biscuits, which were in fact just very, very hard pieces of bread, hard tack, like horrible, thick, dry, hard crackers, essentially, often infested with weevils, which are like little beetles, maggots and things like that. Nothing to clean these food stores. So if you've ever had, I don't know, a burger out of like a burger at like a football match that you've bought from, I don't know, just someone's hands, and the kind of bad tum that you get after that, but just constantly at sea, in boiling hot weather, rolling up and down, no clean water to drink to make you feel better, no painkillers, not really any chance to rest because you'd be expected to work a lot of the time. The only relief probably in your daily rum ration, I suppose. Or in the case of our ship, maybe when the squire made everyone have a birthday cake on their birthday. And given the squire's thoroughness in terms of paperwork, I bet people were conning on all the time it was their birthday. I bet they had a birthday every single day. Why, we've plenty of plum pudding. Is it anybody's birthday? Yeah, it's my birthday. Wonderful! So the only thing that, again, just cake. Just having cake. Imagine having cake on top of... warm cake on top of diarrhea. No clean liquids. One doctor aboard who, as we know, spends most of his time looking at a treasure map, taking his wig on and off, and smoking a pipe. It's not the healthiest place. And as Dr. Livesey said, if ever a man smelt fever and dysentery, it was in that abominable anchorage. The nasty stench of the place turned me sick. So all these mutineers are sat in the horrible old toilet off the ship. The 6 scoundrels were sitting grumbling under a sail in the forecastle. These aren't necessarily mutineers, are they? They just think they're dishonest. Think they're dishonest pirates. 6 scoundrels were sitting grumbling under a sail in the forecastle. Ashore, we could see the gigs made fast, so parked, and a man sitting in each, hard by where the river runs in. One of them was whistling Lily Bolero. Now, that is an absolute banger of a marching tune, Lily Bolero. It goes... That's Lily Bolero. If you've ever seen the film Barry Lyndon, you've heard the tune Lily Bolero. Waiting was a strain, and it was decided that Hunter and I should go ashore with the jolly boat in quest of information. So like a little boat that you can lower down and go on a... It was used in Barry Lyndon, Bob Robert. It was used in Barry Lyndon. Little boat you can, use to go on little excursions, go on jollies. The jolly boat. The gigs had leaned to their right, but Hunter and I pulled straight in the direction of the stockade upon the chart. The 2 who were left guarding their boat seemed in a bustle at our appearance. Lily Bolero stopped off, and I could see the pair discussing what they ought to do. Had they gone and told Silver, all might have turned out differently, but they had their orders, I suppose, and decided to sit quietly where they were and hark back again to Lily Bolero. So they've gone... Bloody hell, Dr. Livesey's coming over there. What do we fucking know? I don't fucking know. Oh, he told us to fucking stay here, didn't he? Oh, stay here then. He's coming close. There was a slight bend in the coast, and I steered so as to put it between us. Even before we landed, we had thus lost sight of the gigs. I jumped out and came as near running as I durst. I love that. With a big silk handkerchief under my hat, for coolness' sake. Well, I hope you took your wig off, because you can't put a handkerchief under your hat if you've got a big woolen wig on top. And expect to be cool. And a brace of pistols, primed for safety. Good plan, Dr. Lives. I had not gone 100 yards when I reached the stockade. So the stockade, as we've discussed, is kind of like a little wooden fortress, like a sort of throw-up fortress, a temporary fortress, but that's still there from the last time pirates were on the island. This was how I knew it was. A spring of clear water rose almost at the top of a knoll. Well, on the knoll and enclosing the spring, they had clapped a stout log house, there you go, fit to hold 20 of people, 24, on a pinch. Is that right? No, 40. 40. On a pinch. And loopholed for musketry on every side, so you could, basically, little porthole so you could stick your musket out and fire at anyone coming towards you. All round this they had cleared a wide space, and then the thing was completed by a paling 6 feet high, so like a big sticky uppy stake fence around, like pointed stake fence around the fortress. That's what paling is. That's why people refer to the Pale in Ireland. People use the phrase beyond the pale. It's a really old, prejudicial, I suppose, phrase from when the Normans conquered the Dublin area of Ireland and put up a big fence called the Pale to keep out all the other people from the other parts of Ireland. And so beyond the pale. That's beyond the pale. It means it's in the hinterlands, in the unknown, aka Wexford. Paling. There was a paling all the way, 6 feet high, without door or opening, too strong to pull down, without time and labour, and too open to shelter the besiegers. So, sound like a great fortress, or it's pretty good. They're serviceable. A serviceable wooden fortress. The people in the log house had them in every way. They stood quiet in shelter and shot the others like partridges. All they wanted was a good watch and food, for, short of a complete surprise, they might have held the place against a regiment. He's talking about, I guess, about people who would be in the fortress. What particularly took my fancy was the spring. For though we had a good enough place of it in the cabin of the Hispaniola, with plenty of arms and ammunition and things to eat and excellent wines, there had been one thing overlooked. We had no water. So he's got that doctor's mind. But he's also got that... he's a bit of a booze hound, isn't he, actually, Dr. Livesey? He's always having like a posh wine with the squire. He's always having supping on something. Supping on a bit of Madeira, supping on a bit of port, supping on a bit of sherry, Spanish wine and raisins, as we've heard. Excellent wine, but no water. How are you all alive? How are you all alive on this ship? More raisins and wine? I'd rather have a glass of water after 8 weeks. I was thinking this over when there came, ringing over the island, the cry of a man at the point of death. We know who that'll be. Poor old Alan, who was murdered by the pirates. Oh gosh, really excellent vistas around here. You could park a Ford Escort in that harbour. Get off! Ah! Dead. I was not new to violent death. Bit of backstory. I have served His Royal Highness the Duke of Cumberland, and got a wound myself at Fontenoy. Also, there we go, Dr. Livesey's seen active service. Served the Duke of Cumberland, so... What war is that? Fontenoy. Guessing it's some of the skirmishes in the 30 Years' War. I don't know. I'm going to have to rely on one of you lads to Google it. I'm guessing 30 Years' War, something fairly Barry Lyndon-esque sort of times, I would think. Perhaps he got his wound. Gin the Prussians. Perhaps he got it gin the French. Perhaps he got it gin the Dutch. But there we go. Dr. Livesey's seen active service, and he's been wounded in the service of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Cumberland. Don't know who the Duke of Cumberland is. I'll put that out there now. I'm not up on my royalty of this period. But I know my pulse went dot and carry one. Great phrase. Dot and carry one, so you know. Beep. Heart stopped. Jim Hawkins is gone. was my first thought. Hey? That to me doesn't sound like... 1745, War of the Austrian Succession. There we go. So Dr. Livesey seen active service 20 years ago. When he was probably in his 20s, I guess. War of the Austrian Succession. Sure. Of course the British were involved in that. Of course they were. Every war in the 80s, just constantly the British just show up. I tell you what we're good at. Being around when there's battles. That mention, of course, to our American listener. We're fully aware of what the British were up to in the 18th century in America. It is something to have been an old soldier, but more still, to have been a doctor. Dun, 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 dun. I'll just think of the doctor there. There is no time to the doctor of war, Dr. Livesey. English, Dutch, Prussians, Holy Roman Empire versus the French. Again, what a surprise. It's usually some combo of all them. I said all of them, didn't I? Apart from Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire, of course, encompassing the Iberian Peninsula, much of South America, but we're a bit later on. So is Spain still part of the Holy Roman Empire at that point? Not really sure. I don't think so, actually. So then we're looking at most of Germany, the electorates? Or are the electorates separate Protestant states from the Catholic Holy Roman Empire? I don't know. My 18th century history, mid-18th century Wars of Successions knowledge, I will concede, is not perfect. There is no time to dilly-dally in our work. Good mantra for us Twitch streamers too. So many people I thought that were bumbling on in the middle of this stream. There is no time to dilly-dally in our work, the work of a doctor, he means, or a soldier. And so now I made up my mind instantly, and with no time lost returned to the shore and jumped on board the jolly boat. By good fortune, Hunter pulled a good oar. We made the water fly, and the boat was soon alongside, and I aboard the schooner. I found them all shaken, as was natural. The squire was sitting down, as white as a sheet, thinking of the harm he had led us to. The good soul! Very favourable of the doctor, but he is good friends with the squire. And one of the 6 forecastle hands was little better. There's a man, says Captain Smollett, nodding towards him. New to this work. No pity, no time for pity, says Captain Smollett. He came nigh and fainting, Doctor, when he heard the cry. Another touch of the rudder and that man would join us. I told my plan to the captain, and between us we settled on the details of its accomplishment. We put old Redruth, Mr. Carson, in the gallery between the cabin and the forecastle, with 3 or 4 loaded muskets and a mattress for protection. Now, why 3 or 4 loaded muskets for one man, you ask? Well, because it takes a very long time to reload a musket. I think we've said this before on the stream. It takes sometimes a whole minute to put the bullet into the barrel of the, or often this is a process of a gun now. Bang, 1 shot. Bang, 2 shots. Bang, all the way up to 6 shots. If it's an automatic gun, more shots. Here's how a gun works in 1769. You have a musket. The musket, you have a little, possibly wax paper packet with a bullet inside and possibly a small amount of gunpowder, so sort of partitioned off into 2 sections. You bite the paper open and you put the bullet into the musket barrel. You then draw a long wire rod called a ramrod from the musket and you push the ball down into the musket. You put your ramrod back. You pour your gunpowder down into the barrel of the musket. You then shoulder your musket, which would be very heavy. You then have a thing called you have the sort of the hammer, at the back, which you cock back like this, like that, and then the hammer has got a kind of a flint in it, which then you pull the trigger, the hammer hits the firing pan, and there's a spark. The spark ignites the gunpowder and fires the musket ball. And then you start again. So they're giving him 3 or 4 loaded muskets so he can very quickly, if anyone breaks loose and tries to get him, he can fire one musket, then he can fire another musket, then he can fire another musket, then he can fire another musket, which hopefully would incapacitate 4 of them with only 2 baddies left. Assuming that's how many baddies there are. I can't remember the exact numbers, but basically they're leaving Redruth in charge. Yes, the old days were rubbish, Rhiannon. But the today days aren't very good either. Bear in mind, this is where this American thing of everyone has the right to bear arms. That's the time where all you can do is basically fire 1 bullet a minute in a pinch. It's not the same as owning a machine gun, is it? Yes, nice normal person who, of course, is a citizen of the United States of America, I'm sure is very well versed in all of this. Extraordinary. Anyway. Guns, politics, muskets, musket balls, firing pans, frisons, triggers, barrels aside. Muskets also, 2 things about a musket. Musket, very, very uncomfortable. Brass sort of shoulder pad here. No way ergonomic. You'd fire that and there's a good chance, especially in the mid 18th century, there's a good chance you might just break your shoulder because the kickback would be so violent. It's basically like firing a cannon in your hands, basically. Right back into your collarbone, if you don't put it in the right part of this here. Very, very painful and very, very deafened, actually, exactly, 50 pence. Incredibly loud. Powder smoke in your face immediately. You just be blinded by this very acrid, gunpowder full of saltpeter as well, which is very, very acrid, very, very noxious, right in your eyes, right in your face, and huge amounts of smoke that it would create from this explosion, basically, in this gun. And incredibly inaccurate. Because the barrel's just one long tube, which is not essentially what a gun barrel is anymore. It's a little bit more complicated than that. That's why later on, later in the 18th century, you get the development of the Baker rifle. So you get the rifled barrel. What does rifled mean? It means there's a sort of spiral worked into the tube that fires the bullet. So the bullet can be fired with greater accuracy over a longer range. This is actually, we've made fun of Alan Partridge, but this is quite Partridge. Well, very accurate over a longer range. Well, the Baker rifle. Anyway, here's Mr. Carson, sorry I mean Mr. Redruth, with 4 loaded muskets in case anything bad happens. We put old Redruth in the gallery between the cabin and the forecastle with 3 or 4 loaded muskets and a mattress for protection. It's essentially like a big cricket pad. Hunter brought the boat round under the stern port, and Joyce and I set to work loading her with powder tins, muskets, bags of biscuits, kegs of pork, a cask of cognac, of course, and my invaluable medicine chest. In the meantime, the squire and the captain stayed on deck, and the latter hailed the coxswain, who was the principal man aboard. So the captain, "Mr. Hans," he said. That's Israel Hands, if we remember from earlier. "Mr. Hans," he said, "here are 2 of us with a brace of pistols each. If any one of you 6 makes a signal of any description, that man's dead." They were a good deal taken aback. Doesn't piss about, does he? Doesn't piss about, does Captain Small. And after a little consultation, one and all tumbled down the fore companion, thinking, no doubt, to take us on the rear. But when they saw Redruth waiting for them in the sparred galley, they went about ship at once, and a head popped out again on deck. "Down, dog!" cries the captain, and the head popped back again, and we heard no more, for the time of these 6 very faint-hearted seamen. By this time, tumbling things in as they came, we had the jolly boat loaded as much as we dared. Joyce and I got out through the stern port, and we made for shore again, as fast as oars could take us. This second trip fairly aroused the watchers along shore. No, it means they're all alarmed. Okay? Yes, it's an old book. Yes. It fairly aroused everyone on shore. Lily Bolero was dropped again. That poor bloke cannot get to the end of that whistle, can he? And just before we lost sight of them behind the little point, one of them whipped ashore and disappeared. He's gone to tell Long John, probably. I had half a mind to change my plan and destroy their boats, but I feared that Silver and the others might be close at hand, and all might very well be lost for trying too much. We had soon touched land in the same place as before, and set to provision the blockhouse. Stockade. All three made the first journey, heavily laden, and tossed our stores over the palisade. Then, leaving George? That's me! Leaving Joyce, I beg your pardon, to guard them. One man, to be sure, but with half a dozen muskets. Hunter and I returned to the jolly boat. So he's got 6 loaded muskets, so he's well protected. Hunter and I returned to the jolly boat and loaded ourselves once more. So we proceeded without pausing to take breath till the whole cargo was bestowed, when the 2 servants took up their position in the blockhouse, and I, with all my power, sculled back to the Hispaniola. That we should have risked a second boatload seems more daring than it really was. They had the advantage of numbers, of course, but we had the advantage of arms. Not one of the men ashore had a musket, and before they could get within range for pistol shooting, we flattered ourselves we should be able to give a good account of half a dozen at least. A pistol again, really only very effective at close range, and even fiddlier to reload than a musket. Loads in pretty much the same way, but obviously it's you hold it like that. But much smaller ball, a bullet as it would later become known. Nowhere near as threatening as a musket. Don't get me wrong, you wouldn't want to be shot by one. But in terms of one pistol amongst 10 pirates versus 2 men with 6 muskets. The squire was waiting for me at the stern window, all his faintness gone from him. He caught the painter and made it fast, and we fell to load in the boat for our very lives. Pork, powder and biscuit was the cargo, with only a musket and a cutlass apiece for the squire and me and Red Ruth and the captain. The rest of the arms and powder we dropped overboard in 2 fathoms and a half of water, so that we could see the bright steel shining far below us in the sun on the clean sandy bottom. So they've chucked all the powder overboard, so it can't be used by the baddies. 2.5 fathoms. How deep is that? Couldn't tell you precisely. I can tell you that roughly it is the length of 2 hugs. What's that you say? Yes, that's right. Fathom is fathom in Old English, Anglo-Saxon as some call it. It means embrace. So a fathom is this. It's a hug. 2.5 fathoms, 2.5 hugs. That's the depth of a fathom. An embrace. A fathom. By this time, yes, 15 foot, said Minister 97. It is more matter of fact, but sure. By this time, the tide was beginning to ebb, and the ship was swinging round to her anchor. Thank you very much, Green Tea. It is a good fact. It's a good fact. But I did, for my sins, that was my degree. That's the only reason I know that. It's not something worth going and looking up. I know it by accident. I'm not as clever as I sound. By this time, the tide was beginning to ebb, and the ship was swinging round to her anchor. Voices were heard faintly hallooing in the direction to green boat hooks. Voices were heard faintly hallooing, in the direction of the 2 gigs. and though this reassured us for Joyce and Hunter, who were well to the eastward, it warned our party to be off. Redruth retreated from his place in the gallery and dropped into the boat. "No, wait for me," which we then brought round to the ship's counter to be handier for Captain Smollett. "Now, men," said he, "do you hear me?" There was no answer from the forecastle. "It's to you, Abraham Gray. It's to you I'm speaking." Still no reply. "Gray," resumed Mr. Smollett a little louder, "I am leaving this ship, and I order you to follow your captain. I know you're a good man at bottom, and I dare say not one of the lot of you's as bad as he makes out. I have my watch here in my hand. I'll give you 30 seconds to join me in." There was a pause. "Good, my fine fellow," continued the captain. "Don't hang so long in stays. I'm risking my life and the lives of these good gentlemen every second." There was a sudden scuffle, a sound of blows, and out burst Abraham Gray with a knife cut on the side of his cheek, and came running to the captain like a dog to the whistle. "I'm with you, sir," said he. And the next moment he and the captain had dropped aboard of us, and we had shoved off and given way. We were clear out of the ship, but not yet ashore in our stockade. End of chapter.